the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Him. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus. Christ the solid rock. He's the solid rock. All of the ground is sinking sand. All of the ground is sinking sand. All of the ground is sinking sand. Take me higher. Take me higher. Take me higher. We wanna see you. We wanna see you. Yeah, 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 yeah. Take me higher. Take me higher. Oh Lord my God, oh how excellent it is to trust in you, my rock. You have lifted us out of despair, unto you I cry. Eternal Lord, wonders are amazed. Forever we sing, oh Lord my God, oh how excellent it is to trust in you, my rock. You have lifted us out of despair, unto you I cry. Eternal Lord, wonders are amazed. Forever we sing, we sing.
Never let me down, never let me down. And so my life is completely surrendered. Never let me down, never let me down. And so my life is completely yours. Never let me down, never let me down. And so my life is completely surrendered. Never let me down, never let me down. And so my life is completely yours. This life can be a theme park with a long line, swipe card with a decline, Amazon with no prime, but my worship is by design. Solid you, oh Lord. No better days I've ever seen. You adopted me, oh Lord. Now thanking you is my routine. I promise you I'll scream this forever. Out of all my days, there's never been one better. Every moment I wake up is another moment I break up. With my flesh, I'm serious. Baby, matter of fact, I'm dead up, dead up.
Take me higher. Take me higher. Take me higher. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on
Encountering Revealing Truth Ministries, family, and friends. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday morning. It's a great day to be in the Stability Studio. We are here to take a deeper dive into Sunday's message. You know, the deeper dive gives us the opportunity to attend to the things that God is saying to us. We have determined to be most blessed. So we appreciate you joining us in the virtual room, in the virtual building. If you're in the chat, go ahead and drop, good morning or some shout out to people that are in the chat with you. Let us know that you are there. And I'm here in the building with the live audience in all of Tampa Bay. And we're looking forward to this conversation. Pastor Brian is here with us. Good
Hey,
morning,
Pastor
Brian.
Lamar.
And we're just going to continue from Tuesday's deeper dive, from Sunday's message. I was thinking, I don't know who would do this, who does this, but it's just the points from Sunday's message, the points from Tuesday's deeper dive. Sunday we celebrated graduates, right?
Yeah.
And some of the things that were shared, I just see like, man, if somebody would have told me this when I was 18, if I had this type of outlook, like it's a great advantage to have access to this information at this point in your life, transitioning from high school to college or whatever. But somebody could chop this up, chop the deeper dive conversation up from Tuesday and put it somewhere where they can get it. Put it in TikTok or something. Who does that, right?
Oh, you mean
that's
literally?
where they at, literally.
Okay.
They can find it,
sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
Because it's just good. It's good stuff. So, email it to them. Maybe we can email the message to them. We could do that.
Okay.
We got their contact information. We could definitely do that. Email it to the graduates. Repeat it in the UR, Pastor Gamage. I like it. Something. Today's part of this conversation is going to add to the value, right?
Yes,
make it even, just talking about, as we talk about TikTok, and we obviously know, or maybe I know, or maybe I think or assume that whole thing crosses generations, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's a different, I tried to go on TikTok.
Right.
And I just felt so lost.
Right.
Which actually humbled me.
Yeah.
Right? Because oftentimes, we're inviting people to go on Facebook or Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I just was in that moment. I said, I could see how someone who's not been a part of this world feels first logging in. Right. And so I logged into TikTok, and so much was happening that I just logged out.
Right.
I haven't been back.
Right.
I heard that it's useful, and there's a lot of things you could do, and I just can't. That and Twitter. I don't understand Twitter either. I don't understand Twitter. I don't understand TikTok. I really don't like Facebook, and Instagram is okay.
Okay.
That's if you're asking me, that's how I feel across. And if there's any other social media platforms, I don't even know they exist. So.
Right.
That is where I am, but I can definitely say there are generational differences between each one of these platforms, and absolutely right.
Yeah. So there were some lines that came out on Sunday just spoke to generations and the generational value, giving us a perspective of it. You shared the scripture reference of David serving his generation.
Yeah.
And I just think, going into, even looking at life now, wherever you stand, whether you're a fresh high school graduate going into college or going into career, you've been in career, but having a perspective that God has given you something to do that serves your generation is a powerful outlook to have in life.
Yes, sir. And that is, to me, one of the just defining moments for us to start to get a picture of how God sees purpose, and how intent He is, and how purposeful He is with our lives. And I believe that it was, when this is spoken, it's just to let us know that, for one, that God has intention for our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Not only does God have intention for our lives, but God has intention for our lives for the generation we're living in.
Right.
You know, and that's just the people that exist right while you're alive, right? And so when you talk about that, it gives you so much purpose, right? It gives you so much really confidence. It should give you assurance that there's God was intentional with when I was placed here, and God was intentional about when I was birthed, and the fact that there's something good that can come from me for the people I'm around.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I was thinking as you're talking about the sufficiency that you feel when you're attending to that truth, that God has given you something to serve your generation. And it's only when you are transforming or conforming to the world that you see yourself as maybe insufficient, like you don't have enough in order to do it. But if you're looking at what God has said, then you have to conclude that God has given you what you need to serve your generation.
One of the things said on Sunday was, if the generation is crazy, it might be a little crazy in you too.
Right.
Right. Like just owning it.
Right.
Right. That clearly there's something about who I am that connects with what God wants to do in this time and in this season. And understanding that, for one, we know that God's not making mistakes out here, right? There's a lot of choices we have, but one of the choices none of us had was when we were born, right?
Yeah.
And so that just kind of grounds us in the fact that, man, there's something intentional, something God has of great intention for me in this time, and not to look at people as the problem, but to understand that people give reason for me to be a walking solution. Yeah. And we know that we are solutions to the problems that are occurring, right? And our solution isn't unknown, right? Our solution is simple. It's Jesus. Yeah. Like, he's the way, the truth, and the life. And and knowing that somehow God can use me to communicate him to others. I believe that what we are starting to tap into, which I love so much, right, is I truly believe this is that the next revival or the next outpouring of God isn't going to be because we do the same thing the same way, but because we've learned how to present the same thing a different way. Right. I like to say like this. Some people are like, what do you mean? I said, well, you have 4 gospels, right? You have 4 gospels. It's the life of one man told 4 different ways with the purpose of reaching different audiences. That's right. So the gospels themselves were written to reach a people. Right. And to reach people in the way that they needed to be reached. That's good. And God's still doing the same thing. So when we talk about wanting to tap into the creative ability you have to share the gospel, this isn't something new. The gospels were written that way. They were written with a person in mind to let them know that there's one true and living God. And I see that same thing happening today. But we've been called to serve this generation. Right. So there's something that God is called us to in order for us to serve this generation with the good news, and who we are knows how to communicate who God is in ways this generation needs to hear it. And if we repeat and just keep repeating and stop creating, then we are limiting who can be reached, right?
That's good. That's good.
Now I'm going to turn my phone on silent. That's good. It is going off.
While you're doing that, I'm just thinking about how...
I also talked about Mama Mildred on Sunday, too. I just did the same thing. I just realized I tried to act like it wasn't me. It was...
But you didn't hit it.
I didn't hit it. Yeah. But I definitely tried to wait for the pause.
I was thinking about the value of being able to assess your generation. You pointed out some statements that Jesus made. Jesus clearly knew who he was dealing with. Like, he knew his generation. Right? Yeah,
this corrupt and faithless generation, how long must I be with you, were the words of Jesus, right? And, many people might be like, man, Jesus, but he knew who he was called to serve. Right. And they were faithless and corrupt. And he was like, man, but he knew also that, man, he's God walking in flesh, that he had the answer. He's the way, the truth, and the life. That wasn't intimidation for him. That just set the context. And so often we're trying to ignore the context from which we're serving God in. And it's you need to know like who you are, and so that you can be who you are for the people who need you. Because without that, you almost lose like you can lose a little bit of your uniqueness because you're not thinking about how well who you are speaks to who God wants to reach. And you'll give up your uniqueness. You'll give up how God has uniquely crafted you to share who he is because you're not aware of how people are responding, right? You know, it's almost like, man, this I'm gonna just use another example, right? This is big, right? You know, I grew up in church when there were no lights in church. There were no lights in church. You didn't have lights, and you didn't have videos, and you didn't have this was unheard of, right? I still remember the first time like it was dark in the sanctuary, and I still remember people were mad, right? They walked into a sanctuary that was dark. Well, it had to be dark so you could see the lights,
right?
And so then we realized, well, if you want it lighter and still to see the lights, we have to put smoke in. So now we got smoke, lights, and darkness in the sanctuary. Right. And we're all embracing this awkward new walk, right? That, you know, of course, Pastor Poe was unashamed in. He was like, shoot, I like it.
Yeah.
You know, and so he let us just continue to embrace what God had placed in us to really bring people to the gospel and to make God big in so many ways. You know, it's like people were complaining about like the lights that are used to enhance the song, but don't complain about the way the person like sung the song to enhance the song, right? Like that's still the same thing, right? They put runs in there, right? They put pauses. They literally brought color to how they sung a song to bring you into the song.
Yeah.
Well, the color just keep going. Right now we got lights that match the theme of the song, and we got hues that it's just we just kept going. And if you are ignoring, right, if you are ignoring the generation you've been called to reach, you'll find all of this useless.
Right.
But one thing that we've always been taught is, and one thing my father always said, don't complain about what they're doing until you've made a better offer.
Yeah.
Like, don't complain about what this generation is doing until you have made a better offer to them. And that's where, you know, the games came from in the youth center. That's where the zone came from. These were all saying, listen, like, we're going to make a better offer. We're not going to try to present God less than. He used to say like this, you got that puppet ministry, get rid of the puppets. Like, don't want no puppets. There's a 3D, he used to say it wrong, but he says 3D virtual reality world. Like, it was like, it's a lot. But we get where you're going, Pastor. You know what I'm saying? I'm simply saying is to ignore your generation is to lower your ability to reach that generation. You can't ignore them. Now, we don't fit into what they're doing, but what we do is it gives us, what's the best way to say it? It's like, you know, and I say it like this as I'm just talking about the creative collective, right? If you can't do some of the big four, I used to call them, like just sing, dance, right? If you can't do these things, can't play an instrument, or you can't teach, then you would feel stifled in your ability to present the gospel. Right. Until we like, no, actually, you know what? You can do some spoken word. Yeah. Right? You can do some spoken word. You can do some, right now, people do some, I don't know the exact phrase for it, but you know, they paint during worship, right? Just painting during worship. And because this is how God is leading them and how he is speaking to them, and all these different things have helped to reach people with the good news. And I believe that that pattern was set ages ago in the fact that the gospel, an account of one Savior, is shared from 4 different perspectives for the reaching of different audiences. Yeah. Right? And that has just continued.
That's good.
Right?
Good. 2 things. One, in the account, Acts chapter 13 is when it's mentioned about David serving his generation. Right before that, the writer talks about, I guess it was Luke's talking about how God didn't waste. He's talking about Jesus, but he's basically saying his life wasn't a waste. Makes me think about how many, whether it be characteristics, character traits, gifts, abilities, talents, or whatever, that we consider a waste because we don't see how it could serve the generation. Yeah. But in that point, when he gets to David serving his generation, it's like God doesn't see these things as a waste. They can be very useful in reaching the generation. Yeah. And then beyond that, what you just laid out is like all of these things are used to serve the generation.
Yeah.
That's the big picture. But then on a smaller scale, your personality, our personalities are used to serve maybe not the hundreds of people who come to a service, but the one person who is living next door to you.
Yeah.
Right? The same on a big scale, all of these things fit together to serve these people, to draw them to the things of God.
I don't know why this is just popping up, right? But I'm gonna mention this, but I'm mentioning it in reverse, right? To how people normally hear it, right? But what's popping up in my heart is Paul said himself, right? I became all things to all men, and so that I might win some. And so and I'm saying it in reverse is saying that, like, Paul already showed us, even if you became everything to everybody, you still will only get some. And so often people are changing themselves and changing who God called them to be, so because they think they can reach more. Paul became all things to all men and still got some. Right. Just be who you are, knowing that there's someone on the other end of who God created you to be, and be okay with who those who's are. That's good. So often it's right. We talked about it on Sunday a little bit. It's not that we don't know who we are. We just don't like the value people have placed on who we are. Right. Right. We don't like how they have valued what we value. And that right there is the source of many people's problems. They don't have an identity problem. They just don't like the quantity of people that value who they truly are. And like, even if you became all things to all people, some people would still not like you. Right. So there's no all win scenario. Right. There's people who I'm just thinking about Kirk Franklin. Right. You think about Kirk Franklin. There's people that just don't like how he make music. But if you were to chase trying to make music for them, he would lose the people who love how he makes music. Right. And the thing about it is you just never want to be in that pattern. Just know that who you are, there's someone on the other end of it that God knows you can reach by you embracing who you are. And don't be upset with the quantity. Like it's I know we say this before, but it's not quantity, it's quality. Right. Think about the quality of I used to say this all the time, because one of the things I would hear a lot in the studio is, I want to remake myself. I want to do something different. I want to do something I haven't done before. I want to step out of my box. And I'm always thinking to myself, there's a lot of people who like you. Like, have you considered them? Like, and maybe there's more people just like that. Right. I'm not trying to like stifle you, right? But what I'm saying is, you've been you. I don't know how you can't make you right. So, it's like I would sit down with creatives and they're like they're trying to be different. I'm like, the goal isn't to be different. The goal is to be you. And if you are different, so be it. But to sit down and try to be different, that's just a weird thing to me. It's a I shouldn't say it's weird. I should say something else. Like that is a bad pattern to develop. Right. Right. It's almost like you'll never find yourself just trying not to be them. Yeah. Right. You don't find out who you are by not trying to be somebody else. Right. Right. Like, a lot of people are like, man, I'm just not going to be that. Then they end up being a whole lot of knots and never I am. Right. Because they just lived their whole life trying not to be that, not to be that, not to be that, and never found them. Yeah. Right. But you might just be them. Right. Right. But that's that. But it's who you are. You don't. Anyway.
That's good. No, that's good. It gives us opportunity to really define what satisfies us. Is it a quantity or whatever that is, or is it just being who God created you to be?
My thing is, anytime you start going from that outside in is what I'm saying.
That's good.
Right? You're saying that what you did isn't new because you've seen somebody else do it. Well, now you're going from the outside in. Yeah. Right. Right. You're looking at what everybody else has done and saying, I just want to do something no one else has seen. Well, I mean, yeah. Like, I don't know. Let's just see what you produce, and maybe it's different. Right. Or maybe it's just you, and who you are doing it is what makes it different. And I don't, you know, a lot of people, I'm gonna say it this way, there's another way to say it, right? A lot of people say, man, Pastor Brian, you know, I like the way you present the gospel. Well, I'm happen to using the same book everybody else is using, right? That's how much you just being you can make what may seem the same different, you know, but I can't change the Bible, right? But I see a lot of people trying to change the source, and it's like, you can't change the source, but just be you with the source, right? Like you know, so I have people like this, right? Just give an example. People come to studios like, I want to do something different with music. Like, I don't want no bass. What? So you want to take all the bass, just no bass, like no subs, no 808s, no bass line. That's you're going, and you define that as different. Yeah, I'm gonna do a whole record with no bass. Ain't nobody ever heard nothing like that, and for good reason.
Right.
Like,
right. That's
you like, man, like, how do you hear the bass is what we want to know. Like, it's like what do you hear? Like, what are you hearing with it? Like, but you trying to, just like you're trying to create different.
Right.
Instead of just being who you are and allowing that to speak, right? It will come through, you know, it'll come through, and you don't have to do strange things to be you, right? Anyway.
That's good. So when we talk about bringing all of those things together to serve,
I don't know how.
be you. I think that was the full circle, right? Yeah. Just coming back full circle is be you.
You know.
Be content with what God has given you, who God has made you. Be content with the people that are around you, right? And serve them.
Yeah.
Serve them. So let's just talk about what that looks like, right? Shifting from, and you know, you stated it before, you talk about, you know, we need to stop seeing people as a resource and start seeing them as the answer to prayers. I think that's seeing people as a resource is the basis of, I was gonna say capitalism, but the basis of us wanting to, like, I'm doing this in order to get something for myself, versus the idea that no, I'm equipped, I'm sufficient in Christ, and I'm doing this to give something from myself, right? And living that out in service to our generation.
Yeah, no, that's good.
That's good.
No, that's really good. You know, we say some stuff. We say things that people always shout about, right? Be authentic.
Yeah.
You know, be the you God has created you to be. And, you know, all those things are actually very true.
Right.
You know, they're very true. And I believe that the greatest challenge to a lot of that is us understanding at that moment we may not have just been exposed to the person who needs who that is. And, you know, and that's what hurts a lot of people from being authentic, right? Because at the end of the day, we know that our lives have been called to serve somebody.
Right.
And sometimes when you're walking down your authentic journey, you don't see the person who being you serves. And, you know, that's where you have to have the patient endurance, right? That's where you don't have to go to trying to questioning your authentic self. Right? Just because you haven't been exposed to the audience God has for the gift you carry doesn't mean that there's not an audience, right? And so but a lot of people, right, they just get lost there, right?
Yeah.
You know, because I think we all know that our lives have been are being used to reach people for God. And so I could kind of understand, right, that period in between when you haven't necessarily seen the audience, right? You haven't necessarily seen the person or the people whom God is using your life to touch. And it can start you to question your authenticity. It can start to get you to question who you are. And you can start manipulating with a good product, right? You can start tinkering with what works, right? And, you know, so I can kind of understand that, right? But at the same time, you know, a lot of times I'll skip that for now, but, you know, I'll stop there.
Well, that's good. It makes me think about what you said earlier about in place of looking from the outside in, starting with that inside, maybe finding validation, going back to God for your validation instead of looking forward in.
Yeah, and I guess what the bush I'm beating around is I know a lot of times I say this before I say certain things, and this is definitely something that should be said before this is, I don't really phrase things as though I'm talking to people who don't have a relationship with God.
Right.
I really try to share from a place of people who have a relationship with God, and even share in a way that helps you strengthen your relationship with God. And like all roads point towards you developing a relationship with God is how, God just has me speak. Right. And sometimes I say that before certain stuff so people can kind of understand. So that's why I say many people like you already know who you are. You're just arguing with your authentic self. Right. It doesn't take God long to show you who you are.
Right.
What a lot of us, and that's what the last thing was, what a lot of us haven't seen yet that starts us to question who God has created us to be is we just haven't seen the people whose lives we know our lives is supposed to reach yet.
Right.
And so you'll start to question what you already know.
Yeah.
And you'll start to manipulate and just mess around with what you already know. And God doesn't leave us in mystery like that.
Right.
Right. He my dad says, well, purposes are known, abuse is inevitable. Right. And so God doesn't want us to be people who are abused. So, giving us purpose is something that God does first. Giving us reason to live is something that God does first. Right. But then this world is just patterned to try to get us to question that.
Yeah.
And,
That's good.
That is
this pattern to get us to question that.
Yeah,
That's
to
good.
question
Right.
that. And a lot of times that's where a lot of believers just have to be like dragged out of.
Yeah.
Is the questioning of who they've been called to be.
Right.
They're not really in a process of discovering it. Right. They're just been smothered by the questions they've had of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of those questions arise is when they haven't seen the fruit of who they know they've been called to be happening yet.
Right. That's
Right.
good.
I believe that's also something that, man, it's a big weight to carry, to be honest with you. It's like you have this weight that that there's people your life is supposed to be reaching.
Yeah.
And then you have the path to getting there. But it's like you know it before you see it. And so then you're like having to endure the season of not being where like you've been created to be. Because you know it, because God's not a miss, right? God's not having you wandering around. Like it's like he gives it to you. And like, even if you don't have words to explain it, and even if some people figure you're arrogant and cocky for saying it, it's like, but you know what you know.
Right.
And you're like, I know my life is going to impact many. And it's, I'm not trying to, and I'm not saying that because I need that. I'm just saying, like, man, it's like this thing in me. Right.
That's good.
And so you see it evolve, right? So, okay, let me, how long we been here?
That's 26 minutes.
And so, I was going to share a personal example because sometimes that helps, right? So, from a long time, like it's like I knew on my inside that like God was going to use me to impact many. And I'm not trying to make that sound, you see what I'm saying? It's almost like me sitting here trying to make that sound different. That sounds the same as a lot of people. But I got to make that sound different. Like I got to change verbs and use bigger words like to make it sound deeper than what it is. That's just what I felt. Now in that moment, my interest was golf. Yeah. And so what I had literally saw myself doing was playing professional golf and being able to sow big seeds so that Dr. Dollar and all them can do all the stuff they doing.
Right.
Like without restriction. You know, I'm just going to fund the kingdom through my golf. And that was going to be how I reached many. Then from there, we went to a, that's pretty cool. It was at the World Dome too, but went to a youth concert, seen Canton Jones and Mr. Dell. They were rapping and you know, talk about watching your people, right?
Right.
The youth teens I was friends with, they were just attracted to it. And it was the first time I seen them respond to church.
Right.
And so I was like, man, we got to do something with this music. Like, we've been in Tampa a long time. I know them a long time. They don't even be listening to church. We went up here to this concert. I saw the way they responded, and I'm like, we got to bring this back.
Right.
So we came back. We had Fruity Loops. I asked if we can get some Fruity Loops in the youth building, so that they can make some beats, and they would come up and make beats on the Fruity Loops.
Right.
All that evolved to a thing called Sound Right. Yeah. I still had that same deposit. So now I'm like, got it. Right. You know, we're going to reach many by traveling the world doing music. Like that's,
right.
We're going to reach many, right? And then, right, Sound Right, season of Sound Right came, season of Sound Right went, right? So then from there, I started serving in the church, right? Then, I'm not gonna go through all them positions, but long story short, went through a lot of positions. Every position, I just saw it as a way God was going to use me to reach many. Many. You know, and I'm simply saying nothing more complicated than that, you know, but at the end of the day, I see people fighting on all those same stages. And I never fought with the stages. Right, I never fought with the stages. I just allowed what, you know, where I currently was, what I currently had a passion for, what I had a love for, what I had, what I believe God was giving me desire to do, in that moment. Like God gave me a desire to play golf, so I just saw like who God wanted me to be happening through golf. Yeah, I saw that. Then God gave me a desire for music, so I saw who God called me to be happening through music. It wasn't as pigeonholed as people, as I see people living today. Right. I see in every season though an audience God wanted to reach. Now one thing that did change, all those audiences were different. Every one of them audiences were different. The golf audience, the music audience. You know, at one point I was doing Greg Poe Ministries, right? You know, and all these audiences were different, but yet it wasn't a questioning from season to season. It wasn't. I wasn't questioning like, man, God, you lost control over what you're doing with my life. You know, I just had to sit down and see how is God going to serve what He placed in me years ago through what I'm currently having my hands on. Right. You know, and some of these things, you know, weren't even my choices, right? You know, and I think that's good to put that here, right? Like, I didn't ask to be the director of Greg Poe Ministries. I was told that this would be this thing I'd be good at. Right. So I was like, okay, cool, right? So that old thing is done with. I'm not that no more. I'm this. And yeah, all right. Next thing you know, and I heard a very chuckle in the back. Many people saw it, right? Went and got some shirts made up. I'm GPM now, right? You know, and I'm laughing because, like I say, it wasn't something I asked for. I just was told that, man, we believe that you would do a good job doing this. All right. And then anybody who's been around transitions around this ministry before, it wasn't much else said and wasn't much direction even given. I just went on over. Right. I don't know much about international ministry, international travel. I do like to book trips, so I was like, well, you know.
You learned some stuff. You learned some stuff.
You know, I'm simply saying, but there wasn't just this questioning from season to season. Right. It was more of just like an excitement to see how God is going to use this for what He's purposed for me to do.
That's good.
And that's exciting. That is, I know I'm going around. sometimes we don't know how to pinpoint what the life is.
Right.
That is the life.
That's good.
That like that's the exciting life with Christ.
Yeah.
Is the fact that no matter where I am, no matter what's going on around me, he could use me to do something good.
Right.
And embracing all the experiences you would have never had you had just stayed like pigeonholed into a moment or an ideal or it wasn't like I was saying, man, this is bad. Like I went from professional golfer in the life that could produce to selling CDs in the life that could produce. Not like, God, that's a backwards move. That was never a thought in my head. Right? Wasn't thinking about the life that could be produced more than just enjoying life with him at every stage, and prayerfully this is
no, that's good.
Something.
That's good.
But I'm just simply saying, we just have to stop questioning, and that's where we kind of end it, right? God is all the while at us giving us the desire to do what is pleasing to him, and like in a lot of ways, that's just what was kind of explaining is like God, I'm gonna say this and I promise I'll be done, right? And this is once again just talking about people who have spent time with God, right? The whole point of all these years you spent with Christ is so that you can have a renewed mind. Yeah. Like stop acting like it ain't been renewed, right? Stop acting like there ain't some stuff that's been refreshed, right? Right? Like, and sometimes we'll bring ourselves back to back to first grade when it's like, no, you're in fifth grade, right? There's a lot of work you've done and a lot of time you spend in church, and the word has done a good work. One of the best works that the word has done with you is give you desires that are holy. Yeah, that's good. And when you've owned that and accept that, you realize how awesome life with Christ is, because you're not questioning what you feel on the inside, because you realize that God is placing desires in you to pursue. And you just enjoy the journey of pursuing the desires that he's placed in you. We're not talking about day one, right? Where it's like, man, I just got saved and I still like to do some stuff that ain't right. So I'm talking about people, you've been saved for 20 years. Right. And you have been attentive to God's word, right? For 20 years. And there's certain things you wouldn't even touch with a 50-foot pole because it's just, you don't have a desire for it. And that is what God has remade you. And you can trust so much more of what the world would call instinct. Like, the world would call it like intuition, or the world would call it like your gut. Right. That ain't your gut. That ain't intuition. Man, God has done a wonderful work with you. That's good. And it's beautiful. And it's pleasing in his sight. And you have grown to the place to where he could put desires in your heart, and you're not questioning the desire because you realize that, man, I ain't out here trying to do nobody no wrong. Right. Right. Like you, it's almost like you've condemned yourself, which is now hindering the freedom of relationship you have with Christ. And God is planting desires in you that are pleasing to him. And just enjoy the journey. You wake up and God has given you desire to do with this. Don't question whether or not, God, is that from you? That's good. Man, you've been spending 10 years purifying your mind and your thoughts and your ways. And like you think Jesus was walking around like, God, is that you? No, he knew that God had sent him to heal. He knew that God had sent him to open blinded eyes. He knew that God had sent him to restore the captives. If he seen a captive, he restored him. If he seen a broken person, he healed them. It wasn't this convoluted life. Right. And man, I first of all, I love talking about anything that has to do with people's freedom. And that's what we're tapping into. But you're free. You're free in Christ. And He's placed desires in your heart that some of them you can't explain, but as you start to pursue the desire he placed in your heart, you'll see why he had you going that way.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But to start to question that, what?
Right.
Like, and that's what I mean more by like, man, God gave me a desire to play golf, right? He gave me desire for music. He gave me desire for food. He gave me desire for this. And honestly, I'm just going after it all, seeing how I can reach many and reveal him through it. And that's what's been the greatest journey, is seeing, God, how can you take this desire? Man, the other day, right, I love landscaping. I love working in the yard. And man, I was working in my yard. And while I was working in my yard, man stopped by. And I was like, how can I turn this conversation about my yard towards Jesus? That's enjoying life.
Yeah.
And so as he was talking, I just was just like, God, show me how I can take this yard and point it towards you. You know, and, you know, by the end of the conversation, we were able to point the yard back towards Jesus. And I'll tell people how it happened. And right, and we was talking about how much we love yards. And I said, you know, I love this yard because God told me to do something that is so, it's I'm going to say this because this is true too. It is, every believer should be involved in some type of activity that makes them practice patience. Like, you should be doing somewhere in your life, there should be an activity that you do that makes you practice patience. It will develop your spirit in so many ways. It will develop who you are. My activity is landscaping because nothing happens fast out there. You have to plant the tree. You have to allow the tree to grow, but you have to water it if it's going to grow. You have to watch it. You have to, like, it makes me slow down.
Yeah.
It makes me be mindful, right? If my yard had like a little pale color, and so I wanted, of course, to be emerald green. Well, I had to lay down fertilizer. Well, the fertilizer is not going to respond in a day. What am I saying? I had to sow a seed and be patient to see what I desired.
Right.
That we live in such a microwave society that as believers, I believe every believer, right, you should be doing something that makes you practice patience.
That's good.
Because it's going to help develop you. Anyway, that's how I connected it, right? So I was talking to him. I was like, you know, and I'm doing this really because this helps me grow a good relationship with God. And he just kind of looked at me. And I was like, yeah, like when I'm in my yard, it reminds me that there's seed time and harvest time. Planting, watering, then growing. And that's helped me with my relationship with God. And you know what he says to me? He said, I've heard a lot about God, but I never heard that. You know? And for me, that's a win.
Right.
Right? And that's enjoying life.
Yeah.
Right? You know, and I'll just use like a small example, but there's so many things, and you'll find that the desires God has given you aren't by accident.
Right.
They aren't by happenstance. You have dedicated your life, like you have spent time in the Word, renewing your mind, delighting yourself in the Lord, and He has done a good work, and you can trust the work He's done, and enjoy the life He's promised that you could have, and be free from all those questionings that you have about the things He's placed in your heart. And just understand the journey is about how to take that thing He placed in your heart and point it back towards Him.
Yeah.
And just walk. Right?
That's good. That's good.
That was a lot.
But it was good. If we had more time, I would have, you know, that whole point. Can't do it now. We won't. But that was a good point about how there are things that we can do on purpose to make sure that we're not conformed to this world. The whole point about practicing, finding ways to practice patience. That was a good one.
All right.
Put that in your notes. And, you know, something else you can do is take the deeper dive. If you haven't listened to the message from last night, I think there's just a great pairing between last night's message given to us by Minister Crystal Jones. Yeah. So last night's message along with today's deeper dive, great pairing for yourself. Share it with somebody else. Today is Thursday. We're looking forward to the weekend. Great weekend. I'm excited. Embracing Legacy does their things on Saturdays. It's summertime. If you're looking for a place for your young people, Saturdays here at 5201 North Armenia, get them registered for Embracing Legacy and add to their summer enrichment. We will see you on Sunday, either in the building or in the chat. Either way, know that we love you. Till then, keep being people who are most blessed.